There are a lot of Pokemon, 1025 identified species to be exact, divvied up into 9 subsects, their respective regions, and yet, with so many different creatures, they're starting to melt together in my mind as we go from region to region. I don't think it's because I'm getting older, rather the Pokemon games have changed their approach to how Pokemon have been distributed in many of the games. Pokemon distribution is kind of weird in the more recent games. I'm not talking about mythical or legendary distribution, rather just the Pokemon that you can catch in the native games. I think that it's muddied the vibe of Pokemon coming from certain regions and has been a detriment into my enjoyment of the games. Pokemon distribution seems like a complex thing to talk about, because it is. It feels so vague. Apart from the newly introduced Pokemon, what Pokemon deserves to be in a region? Is it only the thematic ties? What about making sure that there's a good balance of types and not over or underutilizing a type? What if a character just really feels like they should have a certain Pokemon and you want to include it? There's just so many reasons as to why a Pokemon could be included in a region. This means that fixing or improving Pokemon distribution isn't as clear cut, and due to the nature of what I will be requesting, it actually invites a few problems rather than fixing them. But it's just something that I felt like it had changed since I started playing Pokemon, which I should give you context for, because I didn't start at the first generation. I started playing Pokemon when I was about 8, when I got my hands on Soul Silver. This means that Generation 4 Pokemon were available to me technically by trading with anyone with Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum. Now, I didn't have any real way of obtaining them in game because I didn't have any friends at the time. Same thing with Pokemon from Hoenn, as far as I knew at the time. Those Pokemon were only available in Emerald or in the Safari Zone, which was its own bag of worms. So I thought that Pokemon in Kanto and Johto were kind of the norm in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, until I found out about the radio, which had opened up a whole new world to me. Pokemon I had no hope in obtaining were more accessible now. Makuhita, Carnivine, 2 Pokemon I really wanted to use were now in my grasp. I could use them for battling like I wanted to, and they had this exotic feel to them, like seeing a tapir in a petting zoo. Moseying on to Black and White 2, I had noticed something strange for the decks. It wasn't just Gen 5 Pokemon anymore, it was not only just Gen 1 and 2 Pokemon anymore. Some Gen 3 and 4 Pokemon were put into the mix, and made more accessible. All in one game too? Younger me thought it was too good to be true. I didn't even have to go to a specific game to catch something. Then Gen 6 rolled around, they did the same. Then Gen 7, then Gen 8, then Gen 9. And now here we are today, in which I feel like I'm at a crossroads. While the number of Pokemon I can obtain in one game is greater, there's no real feeling of exclusivity being from a specific region, which I will say first and foremost is a good thing from a gameplay perspective. Pokemon is a game with a competitive scene, and having Pokemon just not be available for a game is already a problem VGC folks have to deal with. But Pokemon now feel muddy together because not only are the new Pokemon here, but so many of the older Pokemon are too. TLDR, I don't think Pokemon from other regions feel exotic anymore, and that's a problem. This is because of the decks being more varied. I feel as if it's an unintended consequence of the Pokemon developers being more liberal with what Pokemon are included in the tall grass, and there being a lack of alternative methods of obtaining other Pokemon. Other Pokemon meaning Pokemon in the context of the lore should be treated as exotic or rare Pokemon to find. There's not an easy solution to remedy this problem, and honestly, I don't think there should be. If a Pokemon is foreign to, let's say, Paldea, then it shouldn't be easy to obtain outside of breeding. This would mean heavily limiting the number of available Pokemon you can catch in the wild, and the rarer, more exotic Pokemon requiring alternative methods. Maybe it could be like in Oras where after the game's story, something invites more Pokemon to appear. Maybe the climate's a trigger. Maybe it's a post-game location like the Sevi Islands in Fire Red and Leaf Green. Maybe it's the Safari Zone. Maybe it's the mass outbreaks. There's a bunch of ways to make Pokemon feel like they're exotic and from outside the normal roster of things that you can catch. Though, like I mentioned before, this does have some real major downsides. Hunting for Pokemon for competitive can and will be difficult, especially since there's no guarantee that Pokemon Home will be online for use on release, or maybe you don't want to pay for the service in the first place. Scarlet and Violet were notable for this issue again, since Tornadus, Urshifu, and Ursaluna, 3 popular Pokemon, weren't available unless you played different Pokemon games and had obtained them. Secondly, this could also clash with how the developers plan out a region. Most regional decks nowadays have around 300 to 400 Pokemon in them, and cutting those to plug them elsewhere might be cool from a gameplay perspective on our end, but certain sacrifices will have to be made if it means a Pokemon will feel exotic again. And I mean, one of my favorite things about this community is when they scramble and hustle to find something rare. I remember back in Shonen Shield I was looking real hard through raids to find a hidden ability Galarian Darmanitan, going through forums and Twitter threads just to get one. It's always a good time when not everything is so easily distributed and the community band together to look for something. They most likely aren't going to re-implement every Pokemon into a main series title anytime soon, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't attempt to make the ones that do return for a generation feel special to catch instead of one of the bunch. Okay, that's my conjecture. I'm not a developer, I don't know the situation at Game Freak, and I really haven't said my own piece about how I could implement Pokemon feel exotic without making it exceedingly difficult. Well, it's kind of already been done before, but the idea of telling a story with a regional Pokedex can absolutely be done. Imagine a one-stage evolutionary line. Take Chatot for example. You, the player, can never find it in the wild, but it can be obtained, and it is in the Pokedex. How? Well, there's this old woman in the major city who's a bird keeper. Not only does she have this Pokemon that you need for completion, but she also has a story to tell you when you ask her about the Chatot in the apartment she lives in. 60 years ago, this place was nothing but a grove for Pokemon. She, her sister, and her brother frequented this place. Pokemon were always here and willing to play with them. Every summer they came to visit, as they lived in another city and this was their secret spot. They had fun here. Many Pokemon, maybe Pokemon that can't be found anymore, lived here. But one day, some adults came to the secret spot. The three had assumed that they were coming to play too, but that was far from the case. They came to build, and build they did. This whole city, the city that we're in right now, every Pokemon that she mentioned, every Pokemon that lived here, they are gone now. Her and her siblings tried to fight back, saying that it was wrong, and that so many Pokemon would lose their homes. But they didn't care. Not that they were wicked and hated to see the Pokemon, but the need for the human superseded the need for the Pokemon. So many Pokemon were displaced. At first the Chatos moved to another part of the region, but the flying types in the north were too territorial. Chatot couldn't face Braviary and Staraptor that had frequented there. And the south, well, they were fine for a while, until the winter came. Bombardier and Swanner would flock there, driving the Chatot out with more ruthlessness than the humans did. Eventually, the number of Chatots started to dwindle. Of course, they're still in the Pokedex, because they're a major part of this region's culture, so they just say that they're rare, of course, but never extinct, because that's too harsh for the young trainers to understand. After her story, she will offer you a Chatot, a descendant of the ones that she caught from a long time ago, but only if you fulfill these two conditions. 1. You tell the professor to remove the Chatot from the regional Pokedex. And 2, you can find a place where, maybe if the stars align, Chatot could return to this region. So yeah, I had this idea about Farfetch where it had this deal where, it's a rare Pokemon, but it was only trade only, and it was mentioned to be rare in the Pokedex. I just wanted to expand the region why a Pokemon that isn't available anywhere else would also be in the Pokedex. Maybe to scrub away a mistake they knowingly caused. This could be the major area city, your Goldenrod, your Lumioses, what have you. The major point is that the development of the city, which would be nice, did come at a cost invisible to those who never knew about it. Maybe there could be a post-game event where you take this Birdkeeper's Chatot to a special place, or the special place. You could leave it there for a while. And then you could slowly, but surely, not only see other Chatots start to appear, but other Pokemon that may have survived the urbanization. But not too many though. Keep it to like 4 other Pokemon apart from Chatot. Let's say Executor, Shuckle, Manectric, and Aromatisse. These Pokemon aren't in the Dex by design. You can't catch them anywhere else. And if you do catch them, they don't have a Pokedex entry in the context of this region. And again, that's by design, because they were forgotten by the average citizen. They didn't know that they lived here at some point, and the professors thought they were extinct too, which would give them a whole new feel, without having to give them something new, like a regional form or a mega. Just the context of them being one in a tiny population, more than enough. Yeah, so thank y'all for watching. Just had this idea about how Pokemon just don't feel like have that oomph. Well, the new Pokemon do obviously, but like the older ones, they're just not getting more. Apart from the buffing, I think that there is more that can be done with making Pokemon feel special in the context of a region. Apart from just needlessly showering them in praise and admiration. Maybe it's something bad done to them. And then that could help just drive a connection between people and the region and the Pokemon there too. I mean, they kind of did that with Charizard and Galar with Leon, but I want them to do that in a smaller scale with other Pokemon. It has to be Pokemon that aren't popular that I think that could that could work with, because that's how you turn unpopular Pokemon into popular Pokemon. Give them a hook, and people will run to the hills with them. I mean, look at PMD. Grovyle is as popular as it is because of PMD, but there's such an integral character to it. Same thing with Wigglytuff, maybe even Armaldo too. Just give these Pokemon more of a chance, apart from just consigning them to having a Mega or something, or new evolution that just throws them out of the spotlight.